In today's video, I wanted to discuss who should win the NHL's Hart Trophy for League MVP this season. I've narrowed it down to my top 5 candidates. We'll discuss who they are and who I think should win as of right now. And that's coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So now that the NHL season is coming to a close here soon, we're about 3/4 of the way through the season, I want to have a discussion with you about who should win the NHL's Hart Trophy. There's all kinds of tremendous performances this year in the NHL that kind of justify being in the conversation. I've narrowed it down to top 5, and I've certainly had a difficult time doing so because there's a lot of players that certainly deserve some credit. We will be doing another feature here once the regular season comes to a close, and I'll give you my thoughts on who's the individual MVP for each team. But for right now, we're going to talk about the entire league and who should be nominated for the Hart Trophy if we were giving out the trophy today. So considering how little time is left in the NHL season, I don't suspect there's going to be a whole lot of change in people's thoughts and views on who these players should be. There's certainly a very heated scoring race going on right now, so we could see a little bit of change in the scoring stats to see who might win the Art Ross or the Rocket Richard trophies. There's some good battles going on there, and some of those players involved are certainly in consideration for the Hart, as they should be. So let's jump in here. I'll give you my thoughts on who I narrowed down the top 5, and we'll go from there. You guys can leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think, and who do you think should win? Let me know down in the comments. So before we could jump into the top 5, there's a couple of honorable mentions here that I want to mention here. A couple guys that I couldn't leave them out. I think they deserve to be in the conversation. Unfortunately, I just don't think when it comes down to it and the actual real votes are tallied, I don't see them making it into the top 3 finalists or the top 5 votes for the NHL voting. But I do see them having tremendous seasons. They deserve a lot of recognition. They'll more than likely be their team's MVP for sure. And they do deserve some recognition. So a couple of guys. One is Blake Wheeler of the Winnipeg Jets. He's having an absolutely tremendous season. With Mark Scheifele missing a fair bit of time with injuries and some significant injuries this year, Wheeler's really stepped up. Blake Wheeler even played center for a long stretch while Scheifele was out, and he excelled, even though it's a position he doesn't normally play. He's their captain. He's putting up all kinds of points and deserves a lot of recognition for the Jets having such a successful season this year. If you take a look at Blake Wheeler's statistics, right now he's got 80 points in 72 games. He is +5 and he has 2 game-winning goals. So for me, he certainly deserves recognition for a tremendous year. He certainly deserves a lot of the credit for the Jets' success. And as good a year he's having, unfortunately, I don't see him getting into the top 5. For me, I really like Blake Wheeler. He's having a great year. But there's just some other performance I think are just better enough to get it more into the conversation. Another player in the same kind of category for me is having a great season is Johnny Gaudreau and the Calgary Flames. Gaudreau is by far to me their team MVP. Tremendous season for Gaudreau, but he's just not quite, in the top 5. If I was doing a top 10 list, both these guys would be in there. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the NHL hardware, we're narrowing it down to top 3 finalists. All my other videos we've done talking about who's going to win the hardware this year, I've narrowed it down to top 5 instead of top 3. Just because there's so many great performances, it's really difficult to project exactly who's going to be the 3 finalists. There's lots of choices that certainly deserve credit, and you can argue really can't be wrong. But now let's jump into my actual top 5. Now the top 5 here, it's difficult putting them in any kind of order. So these are just the top 5 players who I feel if we were voting on the Hart Trophy, who would get the most votes, and I'll tell you at the end who I think would be the winner. Taylor Hall of the New Jersey Devils is definitely in the conversation. He's had a tremendous point streak this year. He's put the Devils on his back and carried them into, right now, it looks like they should have a playoff spot. By no means guaranteed. They're in a bit of a battle here for the wild card spots between them and Philadelphia, Columbus. Even the Florida Panthers are hot on their trail. So, I mean, there's a lot of teams battling out for those last couple of spots there. But considering where the Devils were last year, they've rebounded and improved substantially, and a lot of that is to do to Taylor Hall's play. Taylor Hall's having a tremendous year. He's been a tremendous leader for that team, and he certainly deserves a lot of credit. So for me, he's definitely the Devils MVP for sure. He's one of the top leaders in the league and deserves a lot of recognition. I don't think he would win, but he certainly deserves to be in the top 5 conversation for sure. Now, another player that definitely deserves to be in the top 5 is having a breakout season all around, leading the league in a lot of categories, is Nikita Kucherov in Tampa Bay. It's tremendous of a season that he's having. I don't see him winning. He's likely right now going to win the Hart Trophy Trophy, although that's not a given. There's quite a race going on between him and really 3 or 4 other players. It's going to come down to the wire. At one point early in the season, Kucherov was kind of running away with some of these categories, but he's kind of slowed down a little bit. Some other guys have really picked up the pace to catch up. So, but my only issue with giving Kucherov the Hart Trophy is not that he's not a tremendous player. He really is. But if you look at Tampa Bay, they are such a stacked team. If you look at the performances between Kucherov and Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman and Andrei Vasilevsky, really, like, I understand if you take away any one of those guys out, that team does suffer a little bit. But they're still a tremendous team, and I'm just not sure that he's as valuable as some of these other guys are to their team. So if we're basing it on the fact that they're the most valuable, you know, if you really boil down to who's the best player, but in my opinion, the Ted Lindsay Award that the players vote on, that to me is the player who's like the best all-around season. To me, this should be the trophy that's given for the actual MVP, so most valuable player. And if you look at Kucherov, he's extremely valuable to Tampa, but I think we could argue that a couple of these other players are more valuable to their teams than Kucherov. He's having an awesome season. Certainly, you know, between him and Stamkos are one of the probably the most dynamic duo in the league. For me, if I was giving out a 3rd place vote right now, I'd give it to Connor McDavid of the Edmonton Oilers. As much as the Oilers season has been quite a disappointment, and certainly one that they'd rather forget, McDavid is putting up tremendous numbers. Right now, he's sitting really high in league scoring. He has 89 points in 72 games. He's plus 19 and has 6 game-winning goals on a team that's really struggled to score this year. So where would the Oilers be without McDavid? Can you imagine just look at how valuable he is to that team? On a team that gives up that many goals and has a really terrible team plus-minus rating, he has a plus 19 rating. So obviously McDavid is having another tremendous season. He may not make it to the 100-point mark, which he did last year. I think he'll be very close if he doesn't. But really, at the end of the day, you can't really fault any of these struggles with the Oilers on McDavid. I think he's done more than his fair share, and he's been one of the top scorers in the league. And by the end of the season, he just might win that Hart Trophy. There is a small gap between him and Kucherov, as well as Malkin, McKinnon, and a few other guys here battling it out. So we just might see Connor McDavid take his 2nd consecutive Hart Trophy. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities for sure. For me, if I was giving it the 2nd place vote right now, I'd give it to Evgeni Malkin of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think Evgeni Malkin has always been a tremendous hockey player, and really year after year certainly deserves a lot of credit and certainly a lot of consideration for a lot of the hardware and scoring races in the NHL. But this second half of this season especially, he's really put the Penguins team on his back and really carried them to where they are now. I mean, earlier in the year, there's times where they're kind of going up and down the standings a little bit more. The first half of the season was okay, but it wasn't great. The second half of the season has been much better, largely due to Malkin's play. And he, to me, is just having another tremendous season. Evgeni Malkin right now has 89 points in 68 games. He's plus 19 and has 7 game-winning goals. Malkin is he's just clutch when it matters the most. And he's just having a tremendous year. And for me, I think even though he does have a strong cast around him, I think he's more valuable to the Penguins than, say, Kucherov to Tampa or Taylor Hall or any of these other players. But for me, he's the #2 pick right now if I'm voting on a Hart Trophy. But for me, the #1 vote, the top vote for the Hart Trophy, who I'd give the hardware to today if I'm handing it out, is Nathan MacKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche. For me, he's by far the most valuable to his team, and really at this rate, he just might be the Art Ross Trophy and the Hart Trophy winner. It is certainly a possibility, and I would go on record to say that if it wasn't for his injury that he had earlier, where he missed a bunch of games, that he more than likely would be in the lead for the scoring race for the Art Ross Trophy as of right now. As of right now, instead, he's tied for 2nd, which really is quite remarkable considering how far down the list he had fallen while he was off injured. But right now, MacKinnon is having a tremendous year. He has 89 points in 64 games. He's a plus 15, has 11 game-winning goals, including 3 in overtime. So for me, if you take a look at all these guys that are having tremendous years, for me, one of the biggest reasons he's the most valuable is he's proven to be the most clutch for his team with the game-winning goals and the overtime goals. That's just another stat that kind of puts it over the top for me. And if you look at the team in Colorado, yes, they've rebounded quite significantly this year, and at this rate it looks fairly promising that they will make it, and it's largely in part to MacKinnon's play. Nate MacKinnon, for me, is the league's MVP. If I'm handing out the hardware today and I'm giving a first place vote for that trophy, that's who I'd give it to as of right now. So leave some comments down below. Who would you give the Hart Trophy to if we're handing out the hardware today? Leave some comments down below and let me know your picks. If you're new to the channel, again, I hope you'll consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all fans to enjoy. If you haven't done so already, consider checking us out on social media. You're going to find our Twitter handle on the screen right here. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and all those accounts are linked down below in the description. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.